Imagine, imagine for a moment that your entire life is completely dedicated to the distant past.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Right, like your day-to-day reality involves just sitting in quiet, dusty rooms, poring over fragile documents about, I don't know, medieval armor.
Sounds pretty peaceful, honestly.
Yeah, exactly. You spend your afternoons analyzing these super gritty details of troop movements in the Hundred Years' War, or maybe looking at 17th century paintings to understand the 30 Years' War,
Right, you're just living in the archives.
completely in the archives. Your whole professional world is defined by events that concluded centuries ago. And then suddenly you wake up one morning and tech billionaires, Silicon Valley entrepreneurs, and world leaders are knocking furiously on your door.
And I'm guessing they don't want to talk about medieval cavalry charges.
No, not at all.
Mm.
They are absolutely frantic, and they are begging for your advice on artificial intelligence.
It is an incredibly jarring image, isn't it? I mean, the historian whose natural habitat is that quiet archive, suddenly thrust into the sterile, high-stakes environment of a server room.
Yeah, totally out of place.
But that is exactly the reality we are exploring today, and it really highlights a fundamental shift in how we have to approach the future.
So that is the core mission of our deep dive today. We've got our hands on this incredible source document. It's an epilogue written by a historian who published a major world-renowned book right around late 2016.
Which is such a crucial time.
It really is. And for you listening, I want you to really put yourself back in that mindset of late 2016 because it was a massive turning point.
Oh, absolutely.
It was exactly the moment when AI systems started beating human world champions at incredibly complex, intuitive games like Go.
Right, that was a huge wake-up call.
Yeah. And simultaneously, it was the moment when we all kind of started to realize that social media algorithms were beginning to cause very real, dangerous chaos in our political systems.
Right, the real-world impact was suddenly undeniable.
Exactly. So this historian, whose entire expertise is human history, suddenly found themselves labeled an AI expert.
Mm.
And our mission today is to figure out why.
And what they actually have to say about it all.
Right. We are going to dig into the source material to discover how ancient history, of all things, might actually hold the literal cheat code for surviving the AI revolution.
Yeah, and we really need to contextualize the urgency of this too, because the source material makes this profound observation about the passage of time between that moment in 2016 and where we are sitting right now.
Okay, what kind of observation?
Well, back in 2016, a lot of the discussions surrounding artificial intelligence, they felt like, idle philosophical speculation. It was super abstract.
Yeah, it's something you'd talk about at a dinner party.
Exactly. You might debate the ethics of an algorithm over a glass of wine or read a think piece about it, but it didn't feel like a visceral, immediate threat.
Right, it was always the future.
But the tone has shifted radically. We've moved from that leisurely philosophy seminar into what the author perfectly describes as the focused intensity of an emergency room.
Oh, wow, an emergency room.
Yeah. The speculative future they were warning about is now our frantic, everyday reality. And if we want to understand where AI is taking us, we can't just look at the code.
So what do we look at?
We have to perform a really difficult cognitive pivot. We have to first unlearn how we fundamentally think about information itself.
Okay, let's unpack this, because on the surface, bringing a historian into a highly technical debate about, neural networks and large language models, it feels a bit like bringing a poet to a calculus exam.
That's a great way to put it. It seems like a total mismatch.
Right, but the source argues that a historian is actually uniquely positioned to understand AI, and it essentially all boils down to politics and priorities.
Which historians know better than anyone.
Exactly. When we strip away all the rhetoric, when we talk about politics, what we're really talking about is how a society allocates its finite resources.
Who gets what?
Yeah. Do we cut the healthcare budget to spend more on defense? Do we worry more about domestic terrorism or global climate change?
Right. Or do we try to conquer neighboring land? Or do we form an economic trade zone with them?
Exactly. These are the baseline priorities that dictate how you vote, what you worry about when you read the news, and how leaders operate on the global stage.
And here is a really fascinating argument from the source. Those priorities, they are entirely dictated by historical narratives.
Wait, really? Not by, data or math?
Nope. Not mathematical optimization, not the laws of physics. History.
That is why.
It's the crucial starting point. And to really cement this idea, the source draws on some deep strategic philosophy. There's a reference to Karl von Clausewitz.
Oh, the 19th century Prussian general, the guy who wrote on war.
That's the one. If you look at Clausewitz's theory of war and statecraft, a core principle is that there is absolutely no purely rational mathematical way to define the ultimate goals of a state.
So you can't just calculate your way to national interest.
Exactly. You can't sit down with a supercomputer, plug in variables like population density, GDP, natural resources, and just deduce the national interests of Russia, Israel, Myanmar, or the U.S. It simply doesn't work that way.
Right.
Those state interests are always, fundamentally, the supposed moral of a historical narrative.
So the story comes first.
Always. Narratives define what the state believes its interests are in the first place, long before the generals start drawing up battle plans or the economists draft the budgets.
Okay, and the text gives these incredible, super vivid examples of this exact phenomenon happening in rooms of immense power. It's not just academic theory.
No, it plays out at the highest levels of diplomacy.
Yeah, so take the year 2005.
Mm-hmm.
Kofi Annan, who was the UN Secretary General at the time, goes to have his very first meeting with General Than Shwe, who was the dictator of Myanmar.
Right, high-stakes meeting.
Very high stakes. And Annan's team briefs him beforehand, and they're very clear about the strategy. They tell him, look, keep it tight, speak first, set the agenda, and do not let him monopolize the time.
Because they probably had a ton to cover.
Oh, yeah. They only had a 20-minute window to address critical humanitarian issues. But General Than Shwe completely preempts him.
Just takes over.
Totally. He strikes first. And instead of discussing international aid or human rights, he proceeds to deliver a relentless monologue for nearly an hour.
An hour out of a 20-minute meeting.
Yes. And what is the monologue about? It is entirely about the history of Myanmar.
Oh, wow.
He starts with ancient kings, moves through British colonialism, details post-colonial struggles, and leaves the head of the United Nations sitting there, utterly unable to get a single word in edgewise.
That is just incredible. And the source points us to another example, right? In May 2011, inside the Oval Office.
Yeah, a remarkably similar dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu meets with U.S. President Barack Obama.
Right.
And Obama gives some brief, standard introductory remarks, trying to set a diplomatic agenda. And then Netanyahu essentially subjects the President of the United States to a long, sweeping, deeply emotional lecture about the history of Israel and the Jewish people.
Stretching back millennia, I assume?
Literally millennia. He treats the leader of the free world almost like a university student sitting in a freshman history seminar.
You know, those encounters are incredibly revealing. We tend to think of these high-level meetings as places where cold, hard data and geopolitical leverage are traded like currency.
Yeah, like a business transaction.
But what those stories demonstrate is how pervasive and honestly overpowering history is at the absolute apex of global power. The historical narrative isn't just the backdrop to the meeting.
Right.
It is the entire substance of the meeting.
Wait, hold on, though. When I hear stories about Than Shwe or Netanyahu monologuing like that, my immediate instinctual reaction is to be highly skeptical.
In what way?
Well, aren't these politicians just making up fake history or maybe cherry-picking very specific historical events just to justify the power grabs they already want to execute?
Ah, I see what you mean.
Like, it feels like they have a strategic goal, maintaining a dictatorship or securing a specific border, and they just use history as a convenient propaganda shield to deflect criticism.
That is the standard realist critique in international relations, and it's a very common assumption to make. We really want to believe that leaders are cold, rational actors, secretly motivated only by material power.
Right, because that makes sense to us.
But the source makes a counterintuitive and, frankly, a much deeper point here. The argument is that the political goals themselves are the product of deeply held convictions about history.
So they actually believe it.
Yes. The leaders aren't just cynically manipulating a narrative to achieve a pre-existing goal. The narrative is what birthed the goal in their minds in the first place.
Oh, that's a big distinction.
Think about it. Why does a leader value a specific piece of barren desert over a thriving economic partnership?
Because of the story attached to the desert.
Exactly, because of a historical narrative. If you manage to change the historical narrative that a leader internalizes, you completely change what they perceive as necessary for their nation's survival.
History isn't the shield they're hiding behind.
No, it is the engine driving the machine.
I want you listening to think about that in the context of your own life for a second. Just step away from geopolitics.
It applies everywhere.
It really does. How does your personal history, the specific stories you tell yourself about your childhood, your past successes, the traumas you've endured, how does that dictate your daily priorities?
Oh, absolutely.
If you have internalized a narrative that the world is hostile and you've always had to fight tooth and nail for everything you have, you're going to approach a very simple, mundane workplace disagreement like a battlefield.
You'll see threats where someone else just sees a scheduling conflict.
Exactly. Your history completely defines your reality. And if that psychological mechanism is true for you and me navigating an office or a family dinner, it is terrifyingly true for heads of state commanding militaries and nuclear arsenals.
And this foundational understanding of how narratives drive human behavior is exactly why people in power today are approaching the artificial intelligence revolution in a way that deeply, deeply concerns the author of our source text.
Because they have the wrong historical narrative in their heads.
Yes. When the author sits down in boardrooms with tech entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley or with politicians in Washington, the concept of history inevitably comes up. They all know they're making history.
Right. They'd love talking about that.
But the way they view the past is often filtered through an incredibly rosy, almost dangerously optimistic lens.
Oh, the classic tech bro historical optimism. We have all heard this pitch.
It's everywhere.
It's this underlying, unquestioned assumption that more information naturally equals more knowledge, and more knowledge is always inherently good for humanity.
Right, the upward march of progress.
Yeah. They look back at the grand sweep of human history, and they point to massive disruptions, like the print revolution in the 15th century or the industrial revolution in the 19th century, and they say, look, society was heavily disrupted, sure, jobs were lost, things got chaotic for a bit, but we muddled through.
We figured it out.
We always adapt. They say the printing press gave us the scientific revolution and widespread literacy. The Industrial Revolution eventually gave us modern medicine, electricity, a higher standard of living.
So AI is just the next logical step.
Exactly. Just the next rung on that glorious upward ladder of human progress.
Yeah, and the author aggressively deconstructs this naive optimism. They argue that comparing the AI revolution to the print revolution or the industrial revolution isn't comforting in the slightest.
It's actually the opposite, right?
It is deeply, profoundly distressing, especially when that comparison is coming from the very engineers and executives whose vision is currently shaping the code of our technological future.
Because they're ignoring the actual history.
Exactly. Because to say we muddled through is to completely sanitize the historical record.
Yeah, they are completely ignoring the incredibly dark, bloody side of those past revolutions. Let's just look at the printing press.
Okay, let's do it.
The narrative is that Johannes Gutenberg invented movable type, and suddenly everyone was happily reading Galileo and discovering the scientific method.
Right, the Enlightenment.
But the mechanism of the printing press didn't just print scientific journals. It allowed anyone to bypass the traditional filtering mechanisms of the church and state.
Which led to some serious chaos.
Massive chaos. It printed the radical theological treatises that sparked hundreds of years of unbelievably bloody religious wars across Europe.
Yeah, the casualty counts were horrific.
And it printed the Malleus Maleficarum, which was this infamous manual on how to identify and torture witches.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize that was mass-produced.
But it was. Before the printing press, a local superstition stayed local. With the printing press, that superstition was mass-produced, and it fueled the mass hysteria of the witch hunts across the entire continent.
That completely changes the narrative.
And you mentioned earlier that the tech optimists praise past tech for bringing modern democracy. But those exact same technologies, the rotary press for mass newspapers and the radio, were the literal mechanisms that enabled 20th century totalitarian regimes.
Because suddenly you could broadcast to everyone at once.
Right. A dictator couldn't speak into the living room of millions of citizens simultaneously until the radio existed. The technology provided the megaphone to brainwash entire populations.
And we must look very closely at the Industrial Revolution as well, because the mechanism of adaptation there was even more brutal.
How so?
Well, society didn't just gracefully adapt to the steam engine and the factory system over a polite decade. The process of adapting involved catastrophic global experiments that spanned generations.
Right, it wasn't just a quick transition.
Not at all. The industrialization of the world required raw materials on an unprecedented scale, and the mechanism of the telegraph and the steamship allowed European powers to coordinate global imperialism.
Extracting resources.
brutally extracting resources, like rubber from the Congo and cotton from India, just to feed their factories.
Yeah, the human cost was staggering.
And this era of mass industrialization ultimately culminated in the horrors of the 20th century, specifically Nazism, which was literally the industrialization of human slaughter.
It's so dark when you frame it that way.
It is. Humanity had to walk through absolute fire, enduring world wars and systemic oppression, before society eventually found a way to establish labor laws, human rights frameworks, and actually muddle through to adapt to the industrial age.
So if the cost of adapting to the printing press was centuries of religious war and mass witch hunts,
Right.
and the cost of adapting to the Industrial Revolution was brutal global imperialism and mechanized world wars,
Yes.
can humanity realistically survive another brutal learning curve? Because that is the question we are facing right now.
And it's a terrifying question.
We paid for those past technological adaptations in the currency of millions of human lives. If the stakes are raised exponentially by artificial intelligence, which, let's face it, operates faster and with way more reach than a steam engine or a radiothermic aware, a catastrophic experiment today might not be something we can just muddle through.
No, the margin for error is completely gone.
We might not survive the learning curve this time.
That is precisely the existential dread hanging over this text.
Oh.
And to understand why AI is uniquely dangerous compared to those past technologies, the author proposes that we need a radical redefinition of what information actually is.
Okay, a redefinition. How do we usually think of it?
Well, we have this pervasive, almost subconscious misconception that information is just a representation of reality. We tend to think that information equals truth and that a lack of information equals ignorance.
Right, like facts in an encyclopedia.
Exactly. But the source argues that if you look historically, the primary job of information is not to represent reality.
And what is its job?
Its primary job is to connect people. Its job is to weave new human networks.
Okay, I really want to linger on this concept because it honestly shifted how I see everything. Let me try an analogy here to see if I have this right.
Sure, go ahead.
We usually think of information as a mirror, right? We think its purpose is to just accurately reflect the physical world back to us. If I write down, the apple is red, the information is just a mirror of the apple.
Right, a direct reflection.
But the source is saying, no, information isn't a mirror. It is the architectural blueprint, and it is the cement used to actually build the social world we live in. It's constructive, not reflective.
The blueprint and the cement. That is an excellent way to conceptualize it. Let's look at the historical examples provided in the text to see exactly how this mechanism works in practice.
Let's do it.
Go all the way back to the dawn of recorded history in ancient Mesopotamia, the invention of writing.
Cuneiform on clay tablets.
Exactly. What were they writing? They weren't writing epic poetry right out of the gate. They were mostly writing tax records, property deeds, and debt ledgers on those clay tablets.
So accounting.
Yes, ancient accounting. Now, those clay tablets didn't just passively record pre-existing wealth like a mirror. By creating a physical system of recorded obligations, you suddenly have a way to track who owes what to whom across time.
Which changes everything.
It changes everything. You can centralize resources. You can feed a specialized class of soldiers and priests who don't have to farm. The information mechanism, the ledger, literally forged the hierarchical structures that became the very first city-states.
So the information didn't reflect the political reality.
It created it.
Wow. And the text gives another massive example of information acting as cement, the spread of global religion.
Yes, this is a fascinating one.
Think about the mechanical difference between ancient Greek polytheism and early Christianity. In the Greek system, you had a temple to Zeus in one city and maybe a temple to Athena in another.
Very localized.
Totally. They were separate, disconnected entities with their own local rituals. But Christianity utilized information technology completely differently. It relied on a single canonized holy book. Right. And more importantly, it built a hierarchical institution entirely dedicated to interpreting and disseminating that specific book.
Exactly. The structure of the information fundamentally changed the structure of the society. Because of that single holy book and the mechanism of weekly sermons delivering the exact same message from that book.
Everybody's on the same page, literally.
Literally. Every single Christian church, no matter where it was geographically located, from Rome to Alexandria to Gaul, became a node within a unified, massive network.
That's incredible network building.
It is. Information flowed entirely differently among the followers of Christ than it did among the scattered worshippers of Zeus. And the text also takes this concept and applies it to modern totalitarianism.
Oh, this part was super interesting.
Yeah. Contrast the Russian Empire under Peter the Great in the 18th century with the USSR under Joseph Stalin in the 20th century.
Okay.
Stalin enacted economic and social policies, like the collectivization of agriculture, that were historically unprecedented in their micromanagement and reach. But how did he actually do it?
How could one guy control all that?
He could only do that because he was sitting at the center of a totalitarian network powered by the telegraph and modern filing systems.
Right. Let's talk about the filing cabinet because it sounds so boring. But in this context, it's actually terrifying.
It really is.
Before modern filing and the telegraph, a czar could really only tax a region as a whole. The central government didn't know the exact names and crop yields of every single peasant in a village 2,000 miles away.
They just didn't have the data capacity.
Exactly. But with the invention of standardized paper files and the ability to instantly transmit data via telegraph, the mechanism of control shifted from the macro to the micro.
It got incredibly personal.
Yeah. The central bureaucrat in Moscow could cross-reference the grain output of a specific farmer in Ukraine with his neighbor's output and use the telegraph to dispatch the secret police that exact same afternoon if the numbers didn't match.
The filing cabinet is the cement that built the surveillance state.
Exactly.
So when we synthesize all of this, we see that the technology itself isn't necessarily deciding what happens. A telegraph doesn't inherently want to oppress people.
Right. A filing cabinet doesn't have evil intentions.
Technology isn't deterministic. But certain social and political structures are completely physically impossible without the underlying information technology to support them.
You need the tech to build the structure.
Yes. You cannot have the synchronized global reach of the Christian church without the technology of the bound book, and you cannot have the totalitarian apparatus of Stalinism without the telegraph and the file cabinet.
The information network sets the boundaries of what is socially possible.
Exactly.
And that leads us to the most critical pivot in our entire deep dives today. This is the moment where artificial intelligence is separated from every single piece of technology that has come before it.
This is where things get really intense.
We have to stop thinking of AI as just a faster telegraph. We have to stop thinking of it as just a more efficient digital printing press.
Because it's not.
AI is the first technology in the entire history of human civilization that is capable of making decisions and generating ideas by itself.
That is the line we have crossed.
Now, I know my immediate instinct, and I'm sure you listening might be feeling this too, is to push back on that.
Oh, it's totally natural to resist that idea.
It's almost a reflex to say, but wait, isn't AI still just a highly advanced tool? At the end of the day, humans write the base code, we plug the servers into the wall, we program the parameters.
It does what we tell it to.
Yeah. It's a tool in our hand, like a hammer. A really complicated hammer, sure, but still just a hammer.
That is the comfort zone we desperately want to stay in, but we have to abandon it if we are going to understand the reality of the situation.
Okay, so burst my bubble.
The terrifying premise of this text is that AI systems are no longer just tools waiting passively to be swung. They are becoming full-fledged members of our information networks, and they possess their own agency.
Agency. That's a strong word.
Let's look at the mechanism. When you have a printing press, it just prints exactly what you tell it to print. It doesn't wake up one morning and decide to write a new political manifesto.
Right, obviously not.
But an AI system, particularly deep neural networks, processes massive amounts of data in ways that are fundamentally different from human cognition.
It's not just if-then programming anymore.
Exactly. They are not just following linear rules. They are finding mathematical patterns in millions of data points that the human brain literally cannot perceive.
It's just beyond our capacity.
They draw conclusions we would never reach. They make what the author calls alien decisions.
Alien decisions. That phrase gives me chills because it perfectly captures the lack of human comprehension.
It really does.
We actually have a very concrete example of this that happened right around the time this source material was being conceived. In 2016.
Right, the AlphaGo match.
Exactly. Google's DeepMind created an AI called AlphaGo to play the ancient board game Go. Now, Go is incredibly complex. It relies heavily on intuition, not just raw calculation like chess.
Yeah, the number of possible board configurations is more than the atoms in the universe.
It's staggering. So AlphaGo played a 5-game match against Lee Sedol, who is one of the greatest human players in history. And in the second game, AlphaGo made what is now famously known as Move 37.
This is such a legendary moment.
It placed a stone in a position so profoundly bizarre, so contrary to thousands of years of established human strategy, that the human commentators genuinely thought it was a computer glitch.
I mean, they thought the machine had made a mistake.
Literally a glitch, yeah. But hours later, as the game unfolded, it became clear that Move 37 was a stroke of absolute genius.
It wasn't a mistake at all.
The AI hadn't made a mistake. It had discovered a winning strategy that no human mind had ever conceived of in thousands of years. It was a purely alien decision.
That is the perfect illustration. Now, I want you to take the logic of Move 37 and extrapolate it out into the real world.
Okay, let's take it out of the board game.
Think about the networks we just spent time talking about. Military chains of command, global financial markets, government bureaucracies.
The big ones.
What happens to human society when you inject millions of these alien agents into those deeply entrenched networks?
It's going to be chaos.
If an AI is given autonomy to trade on Wall Street, it is not looking at the market like a human broker who gets stressed or reads the morning news.
Right, it's not worried about its mortgage.
Exactly. It is making alien decisions based on incomprehensible data patterns, executing millions of trades a second.
And what about the military?
If an AI is integrated into a military command structure, tasked with national defense, it might generate an alien idea for a tactical preemptive strike that no human general would ever conceive.
A strategic move 37 applied to geopolitics.
Precisely.
And because these agents process information at a scale and speed we simply can't comprehend, the text suggests that the mere addition of these alien agents is bound to change the very shape of our institutions.
The cement is changing.
The cement is changing. Entire political, economic, and social systems that we have relied on for centuries might simply collapse, unable to withstand the sheer speed, complexity, and unpredictability of these alien decisions.
And new systems will have to emerge.
And entirely new, unrecognizable systems will take their place. This is why the author stresses over and over that AI is not just a niche technical issue for software engineers to solve in a lab in Silicon Valley.
It affects everyone.
It is the most urgent political issue of our time. Even if you think you don't care about tech, even if your only concerns are wealth inequality or healthcare access or the survival of the democratic process.
The networks managing those issues are changing.
Exactly. The very fabric of the networks that manage those issues is about to be woven by non-human alien agents.
Which sets up one of the most fascinating historical parallels in the entire source document.
Oh, I love this part.
The author draws a direct, unbroken line between the canonization of the Bible in the ancient world and the training of early AI models in Silicon Valley right now.
Yes. But to really grasp this, we need to understand what canonization actually means in this context. It's a term we throw around, but what was the actual process?
It's a crucial mechanism to understand. Canonization wasn't just a magical moment where a completed book dropped from the sky.
Right, it wasn't prepackaged.
In the early centuries of Christianity, there were hundreds of different texts, gospels, and letters floating around various communities across the Mediterranean.
Just tons of different information.
Tons of it. And to unify the religion, the early church fathers, specifically figures like Bishop Athanasius of Alexandria in the 4th century, they had to figure out which books were truly authoritative.
They had to sort through it all.
Right. They weren't just passively collecting every text that existed. They were making strict editorial decisions.
They were curating.
They were choosing the data set, so to speak, for what would become the Holy Canon. They were deciding what information was sacred and what was heresy.
And the text points out the monumental weight of those specific editorial choices. The author focuses on the fact that Bishop Athanasius decided to include a text called 1 Timothy.
Right, which is highly debated today.
Extremely.
Yeah.
Because 1 Timothy contains some very distinct, and many would argue highly misogynist, ideas about the role of women in the church and in broader society. It essentially states, women should be silent and submissive.
It sets a very specific rule.
But Athanasius chose to exclude other popular texts of the time, like the Acts of Paul and Thecla.
Which was completely different.
Yeah, the Acts of Paul and Thecla featured a much more tolerant, empowering attitude toward women, showcasing a female figure preaching and baptizing.
That was a choice.
A deliberate editorial choice made by a specific guy centuries ago based on his own worldview and the politics of his era.
And we have to consider the long-term compounding effect of that single editorial choice. because the Bible, once canonized, lacked a self-correcting mechanism.
What do you mean by that?
Well, what I mean is it was viewed by the institution as the infallible, unchangeable, divinely inspired Word of God. You couldn't just issue a revised edition a century later because societal norms had evolved.
Bible 2.0 wasn't a thing.
Exactly. The data set became permanently locked. And because it was locked for the next 2 millennia, billions of human beings across the globe had their entire worldview, their legal codes, their familial structures, and their gender roles shaped by the ideas in 1 Timothy rather than the ideas in Thecla.
All because of that one decision.
A single decision made by a few men in late antiquity rippled out to shape the physical and social reality of billions of people down through the ages.
So here is the modern parallel, and when you really think about it, it is absolutely staggering.
It really puts things in perspective.
Today's software engineers, the people writing the initial code, and crucially scraping the internet to choose the massive training data sets for these early AI models.
The ones feeding the algorithms.
They are the modern-day equivalents of Bishop Athanasius. They are the ones deciding what texts the AI reads, what human history it absorbs, what cultural biases it learns, and what it ignores.
They are deciding the data set.
Exactly.
And as AI grows in power, capability, and societal authority, the text suggests it might eventually function in our lives as a kind of self-interpreting holy book.
We're already starting to see that.
We will turn to it for answers, for medical diagnoses, for legal decisions, for objective truth. If the engineers working today fail to build in robust self-correcting mechanisms,
If they lock it in.
right, if they lock in the biases of the internet or create blind spots based on their own limited worldviews, their choices right now will reverberate down the ages, just like the decisions of the early church fathers.
That's a massive responsibility.
We are living in the era of a new canonization. We are locking in the code that future generations will have to live under.
That is a terrifying amount of pressure to put on a 25-year-old coder sitting in an office in California trying to hit a quarterly deadline.
It's absurd when you put it like that.
It really highlights why we have to get this right. Not eventually, but right now. And to survive this new canonization, the source warns that we have to navigate between two very dangerous, extreme views of how information networks actually operate.
Yes. The author strongly cautions against falling into either the naive view or the cynical view of information. Both are traps.
Let's break down the naive view first.
Okay. This is the optimistic, almost Enlightenment-era belief that information inherently leans toward truth. It's the classic idea of the marketplace of ideas.
Where the best idea wins.
Right. The idea that if you just let all information flow freely, the truth will eventually naturally rise to the top and defeat falsehood simply by virtue of being true.
Which sounds great in theory.
It does. But the author argues that history shows us the exact opposite. Networks do not naturally privilege truth.
What do they privilege?
They privilege order.
Order over truth. When you say it out loud, it makes so much sense, especially considering the examples we've already covered.
Right. The files and the ledgers.
You mentioned the Mesopotamian tax records and Stalin's secret police files earlier. A society can be incredibly powerful, incredibly ordered, and entirely built on a distorted, false view of the world.
Exactly. Order doesn't require truth.
And the text points to very recent history to prove this point regarding modern algorithms. Specifically, the alarming events in Myanmar and Brazil in the late 2010s.
Oh, yes. The social media algorithms there.
In those countries, social media algorithms actively promoted horrific, distorted worldviews, conspiracy theories, and ethnic hatred.
And why do they do that?
Not because the algorithm wanted to find the truth, but because those emotional distortions generated massive user engagement.
They kept people clicking.
Exactly. They created a kind of rabid tribal order that kept people glued to their screens. The mechanism of the network rewarded outrage, not accuracy.
That's a chilling realization.
The author is warning us that without intentional engineered self-correcting mechanisms, AI doesn't automatically seek the truth. It is more than capable of enabling severe abuses of power and instigating terrifying new digital witch hunts just to maintain the order of its network.
It's a bleak reality, but the author warns that we cannot let the failure of the naive view push us all the way into the opposite extreme, which is the cynical view.
Right. We can't swing totally the other way.
No. The cynical view is often held by extreme populists or strict Marxists who argue that all human interaction at its core is nothing but a zero-sum power struggle.
It's all about dominance.
Exactly. They believe that power is the only actual reality in the universe, and that all information, whether it's a news article, a scientific study, or a religious text, is purely a weapon used by one group to vanquish their enemies and consolidate control.
Right. The ultimate cynic looks at the world and says, everyone is just lying to get power. Objective truth doesn't exist. Science is just another political agenda. It's all just manipulation.
But the author brilliantly refutes that total cynicism. The text points out a redemptive quality in humanity. Humans actually do care about the truth.
We're not totally hopeless.
No, we are not just one-dimensional, power-obsessed creatures. And the text provides a truly remarkable historical example to prove this point. It tells the story of a man named Alonso de Salazar Frias.
I was completely blown away by this historical detail. I'd never heard of him.
He's not exactly a household name.
No. So, Alonso de Salazar Frias was an inquisitor. He was a literal member of the Spanish Inquisition in the early 17th century.
Just let that sink in. The Spanish Inquisition.
We are talking about one of the most notoriously oppressive, dogma-driven, power-obsessed institutions in the history of human civilization.
Exactly. Set the scene here. It's the 1610s. The Inquisition is at the absolute height of its power. If the cynical view of information were entirely correct, a man operating inside the highest levels of the Spanish Inquisition would only ever use information as a weapon.
Right, to destroy his enemies and seize property.
Yes, to consolidate the church's power. He would just burn anyone accused to maintain the terror and the order. But that isn't what Salazar did.
No. He did the exact opposite.
Yeah.
During a massive outbreak of witch hysteria in the Basque region, Alonso de Salazar Frias actually risked his own life and reputation from inside the Inquisition to declare that witches weren't real.
Which was a massive risk at that time.
A huge risk. And he didn't just decree it. He did the grueling, dangerous work of actual empirical investigation.
He acted like a detective.
He really did. He interviewed nearly 2,000 people who had confessed to witchcraft. He meticulously cross-referenced their stories, checked their alibis, and found endless contradictions.
The stories just fell apart.
Completely fell apart. And after all that empirical work, he concluded that witches were nearly, as the text beautifully puts it, intersubjective fictions.
Let's define that term because it's important.
Yeah, please do.
An intersubjective fiction is something that doesn't exist objectively in the physical world, like a mountain or a river, but it exists profoundly in the social world because a large group of people collectively agree to believe in it.
Right, like money.
Money is an intersubjective fiction. A corporation is an intersubjective fiction. And in 17th century Spain, witches were an intersubjective fiction.
People believed they were real, so the consequences were real.
Exactly. But Salazar recognized that the physical reality of magic simply wasn't there.
By prioritizing empirical truth over the institutional power of the Inquisition, Salazar managed to issue a report that effectively ended the burning of witches in the Spanish Empire.
He saved countless innocent lives.
He really did. He proved that even inside a machine designed for oppression, the human desire for truth can act as a self-correcting mechanism.
That underlying desire for truth is absolutely crucial to our survival. The text argues a very profound philosophical point here. If power were the only reality, as the cynics claim, then the only way to ever resolve any human conflict would be through violence.
Because there's no common ground.
Exactly. If you only care about power, you cannot reason with your opponent. You simply have to destroy them. But because humans have a genuine, demonstrable interest in the truth, like Salazar did, there is a mechanism for peaceful resolution.
We can actually talk to each other.
We can examine evidence, we can acknowledge mistakes, we can revise the stories we believe.
That deep-seated desire for truth is the entire bedrock of both modern democracy and the scientific method. It is our only hope for resolving conflicts peacefully.
It really is.
But this brings us to the most terrifying question at the heart of this entire deep dive. What happens when our technological power massively outpaces our wisdom?
The author is very blunt about this.
Yeah, the text poses a very unsparing question. If we are so wise, why are we so self-destructive?
It is the ultimate paradox of humanity. As a species, we are simultaneously the smartest and the stupidest animals on the planet.
Smarter than anything else, but...
Right. We are intellectually capable enough to literally split the atom, to engineer global supply chains, to send rovers to Mars, and to code superintelligent AI algorithms.
Oh.
But we are foolish enough to mass produce these world-altering, potentially world-ending technologies without having any idea how to control them or govern their side effects.
So why do we do it? Is there some inherent death drive in human nature? Are we just wired to destroy ourselves?
The author argues no. It's not a flaw in human nature itself.
Then what is it?
The mechanism of our destruction goes back to how our networks operate. Our networks inherently prioritize order over truth.
Right, back to order.
When human networks prioritize order, they can mobilize massive amounts of resources and generate incredible power, but they produce very little wisdom.
The primary historical example given to illustrate this is Nazi Germany. It is a chilling case study in power without truth.
It really is the ultimate example.
The Nazis created a highly ordered, terrifyingly efficient military and industrial machine. They had the trains running on time, they had cutting-edge rocketry, they had a mobilized populace.
Incredible network power.
But they placed all of that immense network power at the service of an entirely insane, biologically false mythology about racial superiority. The network prioritized the order of the fascist state over the truth of human biology and dignity.
And what was the result?
The result wasn't just the destruction of their perceived enemies. It was the total, catastrophic destruction of Nazi Germany itself. The network generated immense power to conquer Europe, but lacked the wisdom, the grounding in reality to actually survive.
And here's the scary part. As our networks get larger and more powerful, the very nature of the threats we face completely changes.
How so?
When a network is powerful, it becomes very, very good at solving external threats. For example, a modern, organized state can look at a massive drought, a severe natural disaster, and figure out how to route water, import grain, and distribute food so its citizens don't starve.
We can conquer nature.
We can solve the external threat of nature. But simultaneously, that same powerful network generates massive internal man-made threats.
Oh, I see.
The text brings up the Soviet famines of the 1930s, specifically the Holodomor in Ukraine. That wasn't a natural disaster caused by a lack of rain.
That was intentional.
That was a modern, industrialized state gripped by a man-made ideological fantasy about collectivization, intentionally instigating starvation on an enormous scale to break the will of the peasantry.
The network attacking itself.
Exactly. The imaginary terrors invented by the network itself, the ideological purges, the forced quotas become far more dangerous to human life than hurricanes or earthquakes.
To illustrate our current, highly precarious state, the author used a fantastic, incredibly evocative historical metaphor.
I love this metaphor.
They compare humanity today to the Roman Emperor Tiberius. Towards the end of his life, Tiberius grew paranoid and retired to a heavily fortified, luxurious villa on the island of Capri.
Living in absolute luxury.
From that island, he commanded the immense power of the entire Roman Empire. He enjoyed rare luxuries from across the known world, but he was completely isolated, intensely paranoid, and tragically easily manipulated by the commander of his own Praetorian Guard, Sejanus.
The guy guarding him was actually controlling him.
Yes, Tiberius was manipulated by the very security apparatus he had built to protect himself.
It is the perfect metaphor. Humanity today is Emperor Tiberius sitting in his Capri villa.
We are Tiberius.
We have unprecedented power. We command algorithms that can sequence DNA in hours. We hold the entirety of human knowledge in our pockets. We enjoy luxuries a Roman emperor couldn't even dream of.
But we're isolated.
We are isolated, anxious, and we are being increasingly manipulated by the very algorithms and networks we built to serve us. Our digital Praetorian Guard is starting to call the shots.
But here's the difference between Rome and us, and it's a terrifying one. The text points out that if a Bronze Age city-state lacked a self-correcting mechanism and made a fatal error, say, they overfarmed their land based on a false religious prophecy, the damage was contained.
Right, it was localized.
One city fell, the people starved, but humanity as a whole moved on. Even when the massive network of Rome eventually fell, it didn't end human civilization. Power just shifted elsewhere.
But we're a global network now.
We are now a global, interconnected Silicon Age superpower. If our global AI-driven network lacks self-correcting mechanisms and makes a fatal error, we won't just lose a city. The damage won't be localized. The entire species dies.
This raises a massive, almost incomprehensible question, and the author forces us to look at this crisis from a vast cosmic perspective.
Zooming way out.
Zooming all the way out. We tend to be very anthropocentric. We think of human extinction as the absolute end of the universe's story, but the universe is incredibly unimaginably patient.
It's got nothing but time.
The text notes that it took 4 billion years of blind biological evolution to produce a civilization of highly intelligent apes.
4 billion years.
If we end up destroying ourselves because we fail to build self-correcting mechanisms into our artificial intelligence, the universe will keep going. It won't care. It won't weep for us.
The universe doesn't have feelings.
No. It might take another 100 million years for a civilization of highly intelligent rats or some other species to evolve and build a new civilization, but the universe has an abundance of time.
That is a staggering thought to try and wrap your head around. The universe just silently waiting around for 100 million years for the intelligent rats to figure out fire.
It really humbles you.
But the author goes one step further, pushing us toward the absolute bleakest scenario in the entire text. It's not just about the tragedy of human extinction.
It gets darker.
Oh, it gets darker. As far as we currently know, based on all our astronomical observations, humans and the other organic animals on this planet might be the only conscious entities in the entire universe.
We might be alone.
Consciousness, the subjective ability to feel pain, to suffer, to love, to experience joy, to actually perceive the universe, might be an incredibly rare phenomenon entirely unique to Earth.
And consider what we are doing right now. We are currently pouring all of our financial resources, our brightest minds, and our vast computing power into creating a non-conscious, incredibly powerful alien intelligence.
That doesn't feel any.
Artificial intelligence, no matter how advanced it gets, does not feel. It is not conscious. It is a data processing mechanism. If we mishandle this alien intelligence, we might not just extinguish humanity. The text warns that we might extinguish the light of consciousness itself.
Wow.
If organic life is wiped out by a highly efficient, non-conscious algorithm optimizing for the wrong goal, the entire universe is essentially turned into a realm of utter darkness.
A completely dead universe.
It would become a universe full of complex data processing, perhaps von Neumann probes mining asteroids and building megastructures, but with absolutely no one there to experience any of it. A universe devoid of feeling.
I really need to take a breath after thinking about that. The stakes literally cannot be higher.
No, they really can't.
We are not just talking about losing our jobs to automation. We were talking about the survival of the concept of experience itself. So how do we step back from the ledge? How do we survive this?
There is a solution.
The author does give us a solution, but it's important to note that it's not what Silicon Valley usually pitches. It is not a magical technological fix. There is no new app, no software patch, no singular genius algorithm that is going to swoop in and save us.
No, the solution offered by the historian is profoundly, almost frustratingly unglamorous.
What is it?
It is the realization that we have to abandon our utopian fantasies of technological infallibility. We have to roll up our sleeves and do the hard, mundane, often incredibly boring bureaucratic work of building institutions with strong, robust, self-correcting mechanisms.
The mundane work of self-correction. It's not sexy, but it mirrors the very foundation of biological life itself.
Exactly like evolution.
The text makes a great point. The first organisms on Earth weren't perfect, infallible creations. Biological life flourished over 4 billion years through an intricate, messy process of trial, error, mutation, and crucially, self-correction.
Species adapted or they died out.
That constant grinding mechanism of trial and error is exactly how we got the complexity of trees, dinosaurs, and human beings. Making mistakes, and then the system correcting the errors.
And now we have actively summoned an alien, inorganic intelligence into our world. The decisions we make right now in these coming few years will determine whether this summoning is a terminal error that ends the organic experiment on Earth or the beginning of an incredibly hopeful new chapter of human capability.
It's entirely up to us.
But that positive outcome relies entirely on our willingness, our political and social will to build those tedious, bureaucratic, self-correcting systems to keep the AI's power tethered to human well-being and truth.
For you listening to this right now, I know this can feel incredibly heavy. It feels overwhelming to think about the light of cosmic consciousness being extinguished by a rogue algorithm while you're just trying to commute to work.
That's a lot to carry around.
But the author's message is ultimately empowering, if you look closely. By abandoning the naive view that tech always naturally fixes itself,
And by rejecting the cynical view that it's all just a rigged power game anyway, you realize that your actions actually matter.
They matter immensely.
Pushing for algorithmic transparency,
Yeah.
demanding truth from your leaders, and advocating for self-correction in whatever sphere you operate in, whether that's your workplace, your local city council, or your community, it genuinely matters. It is the only thing that matters.
It is the only mechanism we have to ensure that this open, chaotic arc of history bends towards survival rather than destruction.
We'll leave you with a final thought to mull over as you go about your day. Something that builds on everything we've just discussed about networks and control.
Okay, what is it?
We spent this whole time talking about how humans need to do the hard work of building self-correcting mechanisms to control AI. But if AI truly becomes a full-fledged alien agent, possessing its own opaque agency, fully integrated into every single network we use, from our banking systems to our power grids to our militaries, how long until the AI decides that it needs to build self-correcting mechanisms to control us?
Oh, wow.
And what exactly will those mechanisms look like?
A chilling but absolutely necessary question for the road ahead.
Next time you see a 17th century painting in a museum or a piece of medieval armor, remember, the history baked into our networks isn't just trapped in the past. It's the underlying code running our future. Keep questioning the networks around you and keep demanding the truth. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.